So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to do the braided puff stitch. It's called the braided puff stitch because if you look sideways on, it looks like you've got braids or plaits going down your work. It's a nice chunky thick stitch, so something nice to keep you warm. Would be good for gloves, for hats, for blankets, or you could use it for coasters and trivets in your kitchen and on your dining room table. So let's have a look at the tutorial. So for this tutorial I'm going to be using an Aran worsted weight yarn. This is Stylecraft Aran Special in the colourway Raspberry for those of you who are interested. I'm going to be using a 5.5mm crochet hook. Now normally I'd use a 5, so I would suggest whatever yarn you're using, you don't need to use an Aran weight, you could use a DK. Go up half a hook size to what you would normally use. So if you're using a DK, normally it would be a 4mm, use a 4.5, just because it's quite a bulky stitch doing the puff stitches for the braid stitch. So it's nice to just have that little bit more space to manoeuvre your hook round. You'll need a needle for sewing in your ends and scissors for cutting off your ends. If you wish to use stitch markers, then obviously you're going to need those as well. So let's start off with our foundation row. So we're going to start off with a foundation chain. So we start off with a slip knot. You can do this in whichever way you prefer. And our foundation chain is going to be made in multiples of 2. I'm going to do a sample piece of 20 chains, and if you do a sample piece with me, 20 chains and then 8 rows, you'll have the perfect size for a coaster. And it's such a thick texture to this stitch that it actually does make quite a good coaster. So we're going to keep our chains quite loose. So if you're a tight crochet, you might want to go up another half hook size. So yarn over and make your first chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So if you're making a piece that's bigger and you want to do more chains, pause the video now and I will see you in a moment. We're going to do our first stitch in the 5th chain from the hook. Now the reason we're doing this is the first 3 chains are going to give us our height. So they're going to be the equivalent of a treble in UK terms or the equivalent of a double crochet in US terms. The 4th chain is going to be our skipped chain in the pattern, and the 5th chain is the one we're working into. So it'll become clearer in a second, but I just want to explain why there are 4 chains being skipped. So we don't count the one on the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going in there with a treble crochet in UK, double crochet in US. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. So you can see there we've got our height, skip chain and our stitch. So we're going to be working into that skip chain now, and in there we are going to do a puff stitch. So we want to do our puff stitch, and you can do this with as many yarn overs as you like. I'm going to do 4 because I've got quite a thick yarn. If you've got a thinner yarn, if you're doing this with a DK yarn, you might want to do 5. So I'm going to yarn over, insert into that chain, yarn over, pull back through. So that's 1, and I'm pulling the yarn up so it's level with the top of the stitches, it's not too tight. So 1, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull back through 2, and 3, and 4, We're then going to yarn over and pull back through all of the loops on our hook. So you might want to go slowly through here, especially if this is the first time you've done a puff stitch, or you've got a yarn that's sort of quite a snaggy yarn. Make sure I don't drop that stitch. Come back through, there we go. And then we're going to chain one to close it off. That chain one is very important. One, to close off the puff stitch, but two, we're going to be using that in the next row. So we're going to skip a chain and then work into the next chain. Now this can be really tricky. So it looks like that's the next chain to skip and we work in here, but actually that stitch there, that chain there, is the one we worked the double crochet into, or the treble into the first time, and then we went back to this stitch to do our puff stitch. So the one we need to skip is this one, and the one we're working into is the next one. So in there we're going to do a treble, and then we're going to come back and work into this chain here. You say this row is the fiddliest row. Once you get past this row, it is so much easier and really quick. So that's one go through, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No, I'm not doing 5, I'm doing 4. Let's undo that one. Got carried away there. Right, yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook and chain one. Again, that stitch has been worked into, so don't work into it. Skip the next chain, do a treble in the next one, and we're just doing this all the way down the row. So we're going to do our puff stitch in the skip chain, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook, chain 1. So you can see we've got 3 puff stitches there now. Now if you are finding your work is really curving and quite tightly curving, it's probably because you're going into the wrong chain. So go back and just make sure that you are doing the right chain. You're not trying to skip this stitch and go into this one and making your work too tight. Now I do have a slight curve here, but that will straighten out once the next row is there. So remember that stitch has been worked into. I'm going to skip this stitch and I'm going to work into this one with a treble, and then I'm going to do my puff stitch in the skipped chain. One, 2, 3, 4, yarn over and pull through all of the loops on my hook and chain 1. That stitch has been worked. I'm going to skip this one, work into the next stitch with a treble, then work a puff stitch into the next chain, one, 2, 3, and 4. Yarn over, pull back through all of the loops on your hook and chain 1. So work your way down the row until you get to your last puff stitch, and I will join you there. So I'm just about to work my last puff stitch. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook, chain 1, and we should have a chain left at the end, and in that chain we're going to do a treble. And you can tighten up your tail and then see how your work looks. So it is still curling on mine, which is absolutely fine, it will straighten out. So next row we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, that gives us the height for our work, and we're going to turn. So we're now going to work into chain spaces, so there's a chain space, there's a chain space, there's a chain space. So we're going to skip the first chain space and we're going to work our treble into the second chain space. And don't go into a stitch, actually go into the space. Now our puff stitch is going to work in that first skipped chain space. So yarn over, insert, and make your puff stitch. That's 2, that's 3, that's 4. Making sure you keep your puff stitch to the same height as your treble, and chain 1. So then we're going to skip this one and we're going to work into this one with our single treble. And then we come back to the gap here, this chain space, with our puff stitch. So this is row 2 and this is the repeated row for the rest of the pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over, pull through and chain, skip a chain space, work into the next one with the treble. And you'll see how this row is working much quicker than the previous row. Go back to the skip chain space for your puff stitch. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yarn over, pull through all the loops on your hook and chain 1. Skip a chain, work your treble into the next chain space. Come back to the skip chain space to do your puff stitch. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yarn over, pull through all of your stitches, all of your loops, and yarn over to make your chain. Skip your chain space, do your treble, go back to the skip chain space, do your puff stitch. That's 2, that's 3, that's 4. Yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook, or the ones that have just fallen off your hook. There we go. Chain 1, skip a space, do your treble in the next chain space, go back to the skipped one, do your puff, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, skip a chain space, work your treble, go back a chain space, work your puff, 1, 2, 3 and 4, finish off your stitch and chain, skip a chain space, and And now we're coming to the end of the row here. We're going to work into this chain space with our treble. Go back to the skip chain space to do your puff. 1, 2, 3, 4, and your chain. And then the final treble goes into the third chain in this starting or turning chain here. So we're going to do a treble into the top of that stitch, not into the space but into the actual stitch. And there we have row 2, and if you turn your work slightly, you'll see that this pattern here makes it look like a plait or a braid, so that's where it gets its name from. So we're going to repeat row 2 for all the other rows in our work. If you want to, this would be a good time to change colour, so you could change colour say every 2 rows, but you need to make sure that you have multiples of 2 in your work so that you get the plait effect. If you only had 3, it wouldn't quite look like a plait. So we're going to go to the next row and we're going to chain 3, and it's exactly the same as the previous row. So we're going to do skip the chain space, treble in the next chain space, and then do your puff stitch. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and chain 1. Skip a chain space, do your treble. So it's exactly the same as the previous row. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, drop that stitch. Do that again. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Try not to drop it this time. Gone through an extra loop there. Oop. I'm leaving this in the video because I think it's important for you to see that, you know, everybody makes mistakes and drops stitches. There we go. Skip a chain space, do your treble, and then go back to do your puff stitch in this chain space. So 1, 2, 3, 4. See if I can get this one to work right. There we go. Lovely. So we're just going to repeat row 2 over and over. I'm going to work up a few more rows for you to see how it looks, and I will see you in a moment. So I've worked up a few more rows here for you to see how it looks. Obviously it's the same on both sides. So this was a chain of 20 and then 2, 4, 6, 8 rows of the pattern, and as I said before, it does make the ideal coaster. It's the perfect size. What I would do, and what I did on this one here, just need to sew my ends in, is I went round the edge with a double crochet, putting 3 double crochets in the corner and then just a double crochet edging around the edge. That's UK terms, that'd be single crochet in US, just to make sure that it was all nicely finished off. But as you can see, it is a really thick stitch. Be quite nice for making a pair of gloves with. You could use it for making a hat. As I said, it's good for coasters, and it would be good for trivets. If you're using it for trivets, I would suggest using a cotton, so you don't want to use an acrylic that might melt with heat. But yeah, that's how to do the braid stitch. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to pop 2 more videos on the screen to help you on your crochet journey, and I will see you over there. Thank you so much for joining me on this one, and happy hooking!